Silence in the room. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Very happy to have you here. You can laugh at the stuff behind there. My name is Raymond Crabe. I'm in the Department of History, and along with my colleague Suman Seth from Science and Technology Studies, it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural keynote lecture by AD White Professor at Large, Cory Doctorow. I would first like to start by thanking the people who have been central to making this happen. This includes the AD White Professor at Large Program Board, chaired by Bob Weiss, who I understand is one of the more than 700 people streaming in, maybe over there? Yes, perhaps. Hi, Bob. It includes the many faculty around campus who have supported Cory's nomination. There's many, but I just want to mention by name those who signed on to the first nominating letter that we put together, and this would include Austin Bunn from Performing and Media Arts, Liliana Colanzi in Romance Studies, Bronwyn Exter, a teacher at the Lehman Alternative Community School, Paul Fleming in the Department of German Studies and also the Society for the Humanities, Larry Glickman, my colleague in history, James Grimmelman at Cornell Law and Cornell Tech down in New York, Lee Humphreys in the Department of Communication, Steve Jackson, Information Science and SNCS, Ramsey Kanaan, the founder of PM Press and owner of Autumn Leaves Bookstore, who will be, in fact, tabling and will be doing a book signing after this event in the Klarman Atrium, starting at 5 p.m. You're all welcome to attend. J. Robert Lennon in Literatures in English and Creative Writing, Tamara Luce in the Department of History, Edmundo Paz Sodan in Romance Studies, and Jessica Ratcliffe in Science and Technology Studies. I also want to thank the staff who've made all of these good things happen and helped along the way, Amanda Brockner in the Society for the Humanities and Kina Viola in the Milstein program. And last but not least, I want to thank my colleague and co-host Suman Seth, and a special thanks, even though she's down doing stuff in the atrium, to Cindy Greco, without which we just would not be able to keep all of this stuff organized and going along. That's right, yes, there we go. I should say a few words about the A.D. White program very briefly. Cornell's first professor, A.D. White, had noted that Cornell's location, as we all know, was remote, in his words, from great cities and centers of thought and action, and there was a concern that this could cause our community to become disconnected and, in his words, provincial in spirit. So he proposed a system of non-resident professors. At the university's 100th anniversary in 1965, the A.D. White Professor at Large program was formally established to bring the world's greatest scientists, artists, and scholars to the campus. A.D. White Professors at Large, as many of you probably know, are appointed to 6-year terms, and during that period they come 2 or 3 times to campus. There's been a multitude of amazing A.D. White Professors at Large, and I don't want to single anybody out, but I will single a few people out and say things like John Cleese, Jane Goodall, Wynton Marsalis, Barbara McClintock, and many other remarkable individuals. The goal of the program is to bring accomplished and distinguished individuals to Cornell to advance the intellectual and creative life of the campus and the community at Cornell through interactions with students, with staff, with faculty, and members of the broader local community, in a manner, and this is important, I think, that transcends traditional boundaries of academic disciplines. It's hard to imagine an intellectual more suited to that task than Cory Doctorow. When Suman and I nominated Cory for the program, we garnered enthusiastic letters of nomination and support from faculty members representing the departments of history, Science and Technology Studies, Computing and Information Sciences, Romance Studies, Literatures in English and Creative Writing, Performing and Media Arts, Communications, Milstein Program in Technology and Humanity, the Law School, the Society for the Humanities, and Cornell Tech, as well as the broader Ithaca community, including PM Press, Autumn Leaves Bookstore, and the Lehman Alternative Community School. That's pretty transcendent of traditional disciplinary boundaries and speaks to his range and to the variety of disciplines and areas that his work speaks to. Doctorow, in fact, has a pretty unusual profile. He's an internationally renowned fiction writer. He's a technology blogger. He's a public intellectual. He's also an internationally recognized voice in the world of digital media and as a technology activist. A public intellectual known worldwide for his award-winning work, his expertise runs a remarkable gamut from technology and AI to creative writing and science fiction, from the recent history of capitalism to public policy and blogging. Doctorow is prolific as a writer, an intellectual, an activist, and a public speaker. He co-edits a blog, many of you may be aware of this, that is one of the most successful on the planet, Boing Boing. He has been the founder of both a software company and a media company. He is an active consultant on technology and design and has had a long-running relationship with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He is also a prominent activist on questions of copyright and technology and writes regularly for media as varied as Wired, The Guardian, and the Harvard Business Review. His reputation as a writer of both fiction and nonfiction is enviable, as is his rate of productivity. I'm incredibly jealous. He has published more than 20 books of both fiction and nonfiction. His works of fiction, including bestsellers such as Walk Away, Homeland, Little Brother, and The Lost Cause, have found avid audiences among both adults and young adults, and have won multiple awards and also recognition as New York Times bestsellers. And many of them have been competitors for the Hugo Award and many of the other awards. It was, in fact, the book Walk Away that introduced Simon and I to Corey's work when we read it some years ago as part of our science fiction reading group, and we realized really quickly after finishing that book and the discussion that it provoked in our reading group that we needed to figure out how to get him to campus. And so we're very happy that he's here. His works of nonfiction, The Internet Con, Checkpoint Capitalism, How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism, are at the forefront of ongoing debates on, discussions about, and efforts to understand technology, media, capitalism, and the public sphere. His latest work, out basically right about now, is Enshittification, with this wonderful emoji. Enshittification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. I will let Corey explain what he means by enshittification. It's a term that he coined in 2022, and I'll let him explain why we should care. But I will note that the term has now entered the popular lexicon. It is already in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. It was selected as Word of the Year in 2023 by the American Dialect Society, and the following year by Australia's Macquarie Dictionary. One final point before I turn the podium over to Corey. I just want to note how incredibly generous Corey has been. As word circulated that he would be coming to campus as an AD White professor at large, I began receiving more and more and more emails asking if he could do this, and if he could do that, and if he could do this, and if he could do that. The excitement was incredible. And every time I asked him, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? He said, absolutely, I'd love to. He has a seriously packed schedule for the next 8 days. It is evidence of Corey's capacious range that his visit has been structured around key themes for particular days. Themes like practices, politics, and economics of internet life, digital activism and critique of capitalism, science fiction as literature and political praxis, and technoscience and policy. I hope you all will visit the A.D. White Professor at Large website for more information on the myriad public events, lectures, and discussions that are coming up for the coming week. He'll be here until next Friday morning. So please join me in welcoming Corey Doctorow.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Is Nikhil here from Flockoff Ithaca? Hey, there you are. Hi, stand up. So Nikhil's from Flock. Am I saying it right? Yeah, Nikhil's from Flockoff Ithaca. They're working to end unwarranted mass surveillance in Ithaca. If you could just say very few words, and then people can find him after the lecture if you're interested in getting involved locally in some of these issues.
Sure, yeah, there's been a lot of local and national concern about Flock, which is a company that uses public safety one case to pursue a person seeking an abortion across state lines, including through states where abortions are legal. Right now, there's a group of people that's trying to do something about the increased presence of flock cameras in Ithaca and on Cornell campus. There's currently 7 on campus and 22 in the city of Ithaca. More going up. I saw one go up on my street the other day. There's going to be sort of an info/organizing session next Monday at Southside Community Center, 6 to 8 p.m. On Tuesday, I believe Common Council is holding a session where people will be able to give public comment on whether they would like flock cameras in Ithaca or not. So I encourage you all to check out both of those things. If you'd like information, a reminder of when the event is, as well as some QR codes to Flock Off's social media. I have some quarter cards, come find me, come take one. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So to sum up, surveillance cameras in Ithaca. Nick Hill has flyers for public meetings and local council activity. All right, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Suman. It's an honor and a delight to be here 4 hours from everywhere. I'm going to talk to you today about enshittification, and my weird dumb collages that I make for my blog are going to run behind me because they're more interesting to look at than I am. And I'll start by saying that we used to have an old good internet. We had a place of technological self-determination, which is a fancy way of saying we had an internet where users got the final say in how the tools and services that they relied on worked. And it was not perfect. For one thing, it was way too hard to use, and so that meant that our normie friends really struggled to join the party. But it could have been improved, and instead, it was turned into a pile of shit. Let me say that again. It was turned into a pile of shit. I'm not saying that it turned itself into a pile of shit. I'm saying it got turned into a pile of shit. And you may be thinking to yourself, oh yeah, sure, the eminently guillotinable Zucker, Muskian oligarchs turn the internet into a pile of shit. And that's not wrong, but it is incomplete. Because the enshittifying crimes of the world's stupidest, most ketamine-addled billionaires are not where this story starts. The internet wasn't ruined by bad people. The internet was ruined by bad policies. Policies that allowed the worst people on earth to decide how the internet would work, to veto our own choices on that matter, and to usher in the era we live in today, the Enshitticene. Named individuals in living memory made catastrophic policy decisions that had the utterly foreseeable outcome of enabling the impulses of the worst people to emerge as the dominant forces in our lives. And the people who made those decisions were warned, and they did it anyway. So by all means, let's look forward to the day in which tech oligarchs are reduced to penury and treated as pariahs, but don't kid yourself that merely getting rid of these sociopaths will fix anything. Because they are not the cause of our misery, they are its effect. To fix the world, to build a new good internet to replace the enshitternet, to make a digital nervous system that is fit for purpose, to help us survive the climate emergency, genocide, and fascism, we will need to create a policy environment that is actively hostile to enshittifiers. You will never make a decent human being out of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, or Jeff Bezos. But we can make those people unimportant. We can strip them of their power by building a society in which doing bad things gets you punished, not rewarded. Because without their billions, without their power, these guys are just dumb assholes with bad ideas. Now, if you've encountered this idea of enshittification, you've probably heard about this thing that I talk about, the 3-stage process, the pathology of platform collapse. And in stage 1, the platform is good to its end users, but it's finding a way to lock those end users in. So think of Facebook. In 2006, Mark Zuckerberg decided to open Facebook to the general public, dropping the requirement that you needed a .edu email address, that you need to be an American college kid to join. But Zuckerberg had a problem because everyone who wanted a social media account in 2006 already had one on a rival service called MySpace. So Zuck made these MySpace users a really nice pitch. He said, come to Facebook, and tell me who matters to you, who you want to follow. And every time any of those people post something that they want the people who follow them to see, we will show it to you in an ad-free, reverse chronological field, and you will see everything that you want to see and nothing you've never asked to see. And best of all, on Facebook, we will never ever spy on you. Not like on MySpace, whose owner is an evil, crapulent, sinister Australian billionaire, immortal vampire named Rupert Murdoch, who spies on you with every hour that God sends. So you gotta hand it to Zuck. That is a good offer. And we flocked to Facebook, fulfilling half the goal of stage 1 of enshittification. But in so doing, we also fulfilled the second half of stage 1 of enshittification because we locked ourselves to the platform. Now, there's lots of ways for platforms to lock you in. Amazon, for example, will just sell you a year's worth of shipping in advance through Prime, so you'd be a sucker to shop anywhere else. Uber can piss away $31 billion of Saudi royal money funneled through SoftBank, losing 41 cents on every dollar of every cab ride for 13 years until we get a lost decade in transit investment and the livery cab business has all but disappeared. Google can pay Apple $20 to $25 billion every year not to make a search engine, and to make their search engine the only one that you use if you use a default iPhone. But Facebook and the other social media companies, they play lock-in on the easiest setting. Because on social media, we lock ourselves in, thanks to something called the collective action problem, which is how economists describe the fact that no matter how much you love your friends, they are still a gigantic pain in the ass. And even though you all hate Facebook, you can't agree on when to leave or where you should go next. And because you love your friends, leaving Facebook is a costly proposition. It has high switching costs. This is another economist term. It means everything you give up when you switch from one service to another. And so long as you love your friends more than you hate Mark Zuckerberg, he can torture you and you will stick around. So that is stage 1 of enshittification. Be good to end users, but lock end users in. So that you can move on to stage 2 of enshittification, making things worse for end users to make things better for business customers. Let's go back to Facebook. Once Zuck had us all locked in, he knew he could make things worse and we would stick around because we loved our pain-in-the-ass friends more than we hated him. Or to put it in economic terms, the collective action problem imposed an unacceptable switching cost upon us, which exceeded the surplus that Mark Zuckerberg was extracting from us. So why did Zuck want to inflict pain on us? It wasn't for sick jollies. He did it because he wanted to make life better for a second group of platform participants, his business customers. So to the advertisers, Mark Zuckerberg said, remember when we told these rubes that we would never spy on them? That was a total lie. We spy on them from asshole to appetite. If you give us a shockingly small amount of money, we will use those non-consensual dossiers to target advertisements to them with exquisite fidelity. And because I am such a good-natured slob, I have filled an entire building with engineers who will do nothing all day and night but police ad fraud, so that when you give me $1 to put an ad in a specific kind of user's face, that user will see that ad. And then to the publishers, Zuckerberg said, hey, do you remember I told these rubes I was only going to show them the things they asked to see? Also a total lie. I tell you what, you post excerpts from your own website on Facebook with a link back to your site, and I will cram those excerpts into the eyeballs of people who never asked to see them and give you a free traffic funnel that you can monetize as you see fit on your own website. So the publishers and the advertisers piled in, and they got locked in too. They became dependent on Facebook because they were dependent on us. We took them hostage even as we took each other hostage. And now Facebook was ready to enter stage 3 of enshittification, where they make things worse for the business customers too. Advertising prices soared. Advertising fidelity plunged. Advertising fraud reached farcical heights. In 2017, Procter & Gamble zeroed out its $200 million per year surveillance advertising budget. They called it programmatic ads, but it's surveillance ads. And after eliminating a $200 million annual spend on surveillance ads, they saw a $0 drop in sales because, to a first approximation, no one saw those ads. They were disappearing down the fraud hole.
So things were very bad for advertisers, but they were even worse for publishers. Publishers found they had to post longer and longer excerpts of their web articles just to be seen by the people who actually subscribed to their feeds, let alone to be recommended. And eventually publishers found that they had to put the entire article from their website on Facebook to make it perfectly substitutive for their website rather than as a promotional tool to drive traffic. And woe betide any publisher who did put a link back to your own website, because that would get your post suppressed because maybe that link was a malicious link. So publishers were reduced to being commodity back-end suppliers for Facebook, and the only way they could monetize their traffic on Facebook was to use Facebook's incredibly corrupt, failing advertising system. So everyone gets a bad deal here. The quantum of material you ask to see in your feed dwindles to a kind of homeopathic residue to create a void that can be filled with things that people will pay to show you, paid for by advertisers and publishers who are being ripped off to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year. So what's the lesson here? It's that anyone who says, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, has been tricked. Facebook did not screw its users to benefit publishers and advertisers. Facebook screwed its users, its advertisers, and its publishers. Just like Amazon screws the sellers on the platform who pay 45 to 51% out of every dollar you spend on Facebook in junk fees to Jeff Bezos. Just like Apple and Google screw everyone who has an app on iOS or Android, taking 30 cents out of every dollar you spend there. Whether you pay or whether you don't pay, anyone who can be turned into the product is the product. It is platforms versus the world. The only difference is that the platform owners know that they're on the same team, and we all think that we're on different teams. Google and Apple are not on different teams. The single largest payment Apple receives every year is that $20 billion check that Sundar Pichai negotiates personally with Tim Cook once a year as a bribe to Apple not to make a rival search engine. Is that illegal? Yeah, it's totally illegal. Last year, Google was actually convicted of being an illegal monopolist for doing this. But this month, the judge that convicted Apple, Amit Mehta, decided to let Google continue to offer Apple bribes on the grounds that if Apple didn't get $20 billion in annual bribes from Google, they wouldn't be able to afford the R&D to make cool new iPhone features. Meanwhile, in 2022, Google and Meta entered into an illegal collusive conspiracy called Jedi Blue to rig the advertising market to get more money from advertisers and give less of it to publishers. These guys, they're on one team. Every one of those companies whose CEOs personally gave $1 million to Donald Trump to sit behind him on the inauguration dais, that was the team photo op. They are on team tech oligarch, and everyone else, even oligarchs who don't work in tech, are on the other team. So that's enshittification as seen from the outside. Stage one, a company is good to its end users. It finds a way to lock them in. Stage two, the company screws those users to lure in business customers while finding a way to lock them in. And stage three, the company screws those business customers and everybody loses. Except the corporate execs and their investors. But even they aren't happy because they know that the equilibrium in which all the value has been transferred to investors and executives, except for the minimum needed to keep everyone locked in, that is a brittle equilibrium. The difference between I hate this place, but I can't seem to stop using it, and I hate this place, and I'm never coming back, is razor thin. All it takes is a live stream mass shooting, a Cambridge Analytica scandal, a whistleblower, and users bolt for the exits, whereupon the stock markets stage mass sell-offs of the company's stock. So whenever users get so fucked up with an enshittified platform that they decide to leave, the company panics. But this is Silicon Valley, so they have a technical term for panicking. They call it pivoting. And that's how it came to be that in 2021, Mark Zuckerberg arose from his sarcophagus and intoned, "Hearken to me, brothers and sisters, for I've had a vision. I know I told you that your future would consist solely of arguing with your racist uncle using the primitive text interface I invented in my Harvard dorm room so my pals and I could non-consensually rate the fuckability of Harvard undergraduates. But lo, I have received a new plan from on high, and the true future is one in which I convert you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low-polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character whom I will imprison in a virtual world I stole from a 25-year-old's dystopian cyberpunk novel that I call the metaverse." Now, the point wasn't to actually make a metaverse. though I'm sure that would have been a nice bonus for Meta and Zuck. The point was to create a narrative to explain how Facebook could continue to grow after it had captured virtually every social media user. And when Metaverse stopped performing that narrative duty, it was AI and then superintelligence. All these tech monopolists, they have a serious growth story problem. Because once Google had 90% of the search market, how was it going to grow? I mean, sure, it could raise 1 billion humans to adulthood and then make them Google customers, but Google Classroom takes a decade to pay off. And the company needs a narrative about growth today, lest the market decide that that company is now a mature firm and not a growth firm, and therefore worth a fraction of what it was worth the day before. So let's get back to enshittification. Why is enshittification happening? And more to the point, why is it happening everywhere now? To understand that, we have to unpack the policies that used to prevent enshittification and how those policies got gutted in living memory by named individuals who were warned about the consequence of their policy decisions, ignored those warnings, and created the conditions where the worst people in tech could get immensely, obscenely wealthy by making tech worse. So let's start with competition law. From the Gilded Age into the oil crisis of the 1970s, American antitrust law had one purpose: to prevent companies and their owners from becoming too powerful, on the basis that corporations that were too big to jail would ultimately be too big to care, and we would all suffer. All other things being equal, a company that you can escape from has to treat you better, because otherwise you will leave. And to be able to escape from a company, there needs to be another company whose products and services you can escape to. But in the 1970s, a group of economists associated with the Chicago School and headed by the malignant, corrupt, racist Nixonite judge Robert Bork promulgated a new theory that governments shouldn't fight monopolies, that governments should nurture monopolies. Because if a company secures a monopoly, it most likely has done so by being better than everyone else. If Google has a 90% market share in search, which it does, then that tells us that it must be the best search engine. And wouldn't it be perverse to use public funds to punish a company for being so good that we all want to use their products? Now, if that company did ever use its monopoly, raising prices or lowering quality, then the market would solve the problem. But that is not what happened after we instituted this policy. Instead, we got swindles like the diapers.com affair. In 2010, Amazon decided to buy a company called diapers.com, at the time the most successful e-commerce retailer for new parents. It was far superior than anything Amazon could bring to market, and diapers.com didn't want to sell to Amazon. So Amazon embarked on a campaign of something economists call predatory pricing. It's an illegal maneuver where you sell goods below cost in order to chase a competitor out of the market. Amazon spent $200 million selling diapers below cost, and they drove diapers.com into bankruptcy and then acquired them for pennies on the dollar and shut them down. Now, $200 million may sound like a lot, but for Amazon, it was a steal, because once they destroyed diapers.com and wiped out the company's investors, it meant that no one would ever say no to Amazon again, meaning that Amazon could buy and neutralize any competitor that threatened it in the market. Now, this is the totally foreseeable outcome of the decision not to enforce antitrust laws that ban things like predatory pricing and anti-competitive mergers. But Bork and the Chicago School economists insisted that this would never happen. 50 years later, the failure to enforce laws intended to prevent monopolization has had the totally foreseeable outcome of leading to monopolies that control every aspect of our economy. The list of sectors dominated by 5 or fewer global companies is so long I couldn't scratch the surface here tonight. It ranges from glass bottles to vitamin C, sterile saline bags to sea freight, athletic shoes to microchips, consumer packaged goods to mattresses, eyeglasses to professional wrestling. Our whole world has been sewn up by monopolies. And still, these economists insist that their pro-monopoly policies were not to blame. It's like we used to put down rat poison, and we didn't have a rat problem. And then these guys, they all made us stop, and now rats are chewing our faces off. And they're making these wide, innocent eyes and saying, how can you be so sure that our pro-rat policies are connected to the global conquest of rats? Maybe we are simply living through the time of the rat. Maybe sunspots caused rats to become more fecund than at any time in human history. And sure, the rats did buy all the rat poison factories and shut them down, but so what of it? Shutting down rat poison factories when you are not putting down rat poison, that is economically rational. It is Pareto optimal. The failure to enforce antitrust law allowed tech giants, not just Amazon, to swallow their competitors, like Facebook that bought Instagram at a time when it had 12 employees for $1 billion, and had its merger waved through the Obama administration, even after Mark Zuckerberg sent his CFO a memo defending the acquisition by explaining that people were leaving Facebook for Instagram, and acquiring Instagram would mean that no matter whether those people left Facebook or not, they would still be his customers. This from a guy who, again, put in writing, it is better to buy than to compete. And then there's Google, a company that has had one successful product to its name, a 27-year-old search engine made in the previous millennium, whose every internal product launch, almost without exception, has been a failure, and whose every successful product beyond search was someone else's company that they bought, merged, and neutralized as a competitor. Android, ad tech, maps, docs, YouTube, server management, customer service, the whole alphabet from A to Z. So we lost competition, and with it, we lost the fear and the discipline that it imposed that our business, losing our business or our labor used to impose on tech leaders. But we lost something else when we lost competition. We lost regulation too. Competition, that's the discipline that markets impose on firms, and regulation is the discipline that states impose on firms. But they're really just two faces of the same coin, because without competition, companies undertake these incestuous orgies of mergers and are transformed into cartels of inbred companies. When a sector collapses into a handful of firms, it gains the power to capture its regulators, because together, a small number of firms finds it easy to act in concert. After all, a sector composed of 100 small and medium-sized industries is a chaotic rabble. They can't agree on what lie they're going to tell their regulator. They can't even agree on how to cater the meeting where they discuss it. But let a sector cartelize. Let it dwindle to 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 or just the one company that makes every eyeglass pair in this room. And they find it easy to converge on a common bargaining posture. And what's more, since these firms don't compete with each other, rather they divide up their markets like the Pope dividing up the New World, they have no wasteful competition to contend with. Google can pay Apple $20 billion a year to stay out of the search market, which means that their profits aren't eroded by what Peter Thiel calls wasteful competition. So thus fortified with their billions in ill-gotten loot, cartel members can divert a stream of money away from this torrent of cash and overwhelm its regulators. Now, this is something that everyone should be able to agree on. Even the most musk-addled libertarian who can no longer read their copy of The Fountainhead because the pages are all still stuck together, who thinks that the only job of the state should be to enforce contracts, has to be able to see that you need a muscular regulator to enforce that contract. If the regulator is weaker than the company whose contracts they're supposed to be enforcing, the regulator will not be able to do its job. The smallest state you can have is dictated by the largest corporation you are willing to tolerate. As competition disappeared, so did regulation. Here in the US, Congress has not passed a new consumer privacy law since 1988, when Ronald Reagan signed the Video Privacy Protection Act, which bars video store clerks from telling newspapers which VHS cassettes you have. So why hasn't Congress bestirred itself to defend Americans from technological privacy threats since Die Hard was in theaters? Because of regulatory capture. If you want corporations to fear publicly accountable government regulators, you need to subject them to competition from one another. Shriven of competitive and regulatory discipline, corporate bosses have been able to enshittify to their shriveled heart's content. Because digital technology is special, but because digital technology has a special technical characteristic, it is uniquely hospitable to enshittification. And that special characteristic of digital technology is its flexibility. Technology is flexible, digital technology is flexible in a way that physical technology is not. Walmart cannot double the price of umbrellas the minute it starts raining, but digital businesses can use surveillance data about each of its customers to raise prices based on their inferred desperation. So think here of the gig economy, where your shitty boss is a shitty app, and you don't even get to call yourself an employee, meaning your boss can offer every worker a different wage for every job. This is a practice that the legal scholar Vina Dubo calls algorithmic wage discrimination. If you drive Uber, you get offered lower and lower wages the more readily you accept jobs. Uber erodes the pay of drivers based on their historical willingness to drive for less money, even if, they hope to put you in a situation where you've jettisoned all the other things that used to let you be more selective. As bad as that is for Uber drivers, it's much worse for nurses. Contract nurses in America sell their labor through one of a cartel of 4 giant apps, each of which describes itself as Uber for nurses. And these apps do a real-time lookup on each nurse's credit history before they offer them a shift. And they pay one of the sprawling, unregulated data brokers to tell them how much credit card debt that nurse is carrying and whether it's delinquent. And the more financially desperate the nurse is, the less the nurse is offered for that shift. The ability to alter the deal for every user and every interaction, it is unique to digital businesses. It's something I call twiddling, whereby digital firms are able to adjust prices, costs, offers, recommendations, search rankings, and other foundational aspects of the business for each user, for each session. Nursing is now a digital labor market, which means that employers can apply a desperation discount to every paycheck they cut. And which also means that the nurse who's inserting your catheter might have driven Uber until midnight that night and skipped breakfast so that they could make rent this month. Good luck with that. This kind of grotesque abuse is only possible because of the death of competition and regulation, but not all regulation died with monopolization. There is a form of regulation that is extraordinarily beneficial to tech companies, a form of regulation we colloquially call IP law. In corporate circles, IP law has an extremely crisp and precise meaning. IP law means any law or policy that allows the owners of the firm to reach beyond its walls and exert control over the conduct of its competitors, its critics, and its customers. By design, modern IP law is fully compatible with digital monopolies. IP law, not privacy law, not consumer law, not labor law, is the most significant regulatory framework that we apply to the internet. Let's just take one example, a law called anti-circumvention law. Under anti-circumvention law, you are forbidden from bypassing any kind of digital lock. You can't get around an access control that is designed to stop you from making a change in how a product or service works. Basically, once a company draws a little technological box around some part of its device or service and stakes out a "thou shalt not tamper with" this sign, it becomes illegal for you to look inside the box or change the things inside of it, even if the device we're talking about is your property, and even if the change you want to make is absolutely legal. Violating the sanctity of the box is illegal. In the US, our anti-circumvention law is Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, signed into law in 1998 by Bill Clinton. And it penalizes circumvention with a 5-year prison sentence and a $500,000 fine for a first offense, for anyone who circumvents an access control or anyone who helps someone circumvent an access control. Which means that merely publishing a security alert that says, hey, that thing you rely on, your car's informatics system or your artificial pancreas, it has a major vulnerability that is putting you at risk of life and limb. And here's how I know it, because I have found this defect. Publishing that defect makes you liable to criminal sanctions. So what does this have to do with enshittification? Well, remember how I said digital technology is flexible? Computer scientists, they actually have a vocabulary for describing that flexibility in technical terms. Formally, the only computer that we really know how to make is something called a Turing-complete universal von Neumann machine, an engine that is capable of computing every valid program. And what that means is that every computer can run every program that is valid. And that means that for every 10-foot pile of shit some company installs in its product, someone else can make an 11-foot ladder that you can use to get over it. If you don't like the restrictions that Apple or Google or Xbox or PlayStation put on their app stores, you could just install another app store run by someone else, someone who might not steal 30 cents out of every dollar that you spend in those stores. After all, that device is yours. It is your property. And no legislature has ever passed a law saying that every games company, app vendor, Patreon performer, and retailer has to give 30% of everything you spend to Google, Apple, Microsoft, or Sony. But to avoid using their app store, you would have to bypass the digital lock that keeps you from changing the app store on your iPhone, your Android device, your Xbox, or your PS5. And that is a felony under Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. That's why Jay Freeman, who started a project called Cydia, he calls this law the felony contempt of business model law. Because there are these laws that can put you in prison for failing to organize your affairs to benefit the shareholders of these tech giants at your own expense, the marvelous flexibility of digital technology once acted as a check on these enshittificatory impulses of tech bosses. You remember when Facebook was starting out, when they were trying to lure users away from MySpace by promising them a better user experience and superior privacy guarantees? That wasn't how they stole Rupert Murdoch's users out from under his nose. No one was convinced to jump ship to Facebook with a pitch that went, come over here and hang out in smug solitude, admiring our superior graphic design and our excellent terms of service all alone until your dumb friends get the message and join you. No, what Zuckerberg did was he gave those MySpace users a bot. And you gave that bot your login and your password for MySpace, and several times a day he sent the bot to MySpace to impersonate you, log in, scrape everything waiting for you, and put it in your Facebook inbox where you could read it, reply to it, and it would be pushed back out to MySpace. Because all that stuff about switching costs and collective action problems, this marvelous flexibility that digital tools have destroys collective action problems. It zeroes out switching costs. We call this process of making a new thing that works with an existing thing interoperability. Interoperability, it's why you can put anyone's shoelaces in your shoes. It's why you can put any light bulb in a light socket. It's why you can use any browser to access any web page. And as good as interoperability is, what's even better is adversarial interoperability. This is where you reverse engineer, you scrape and you hack an existing technology to make it do something the manufacturer did not intend and does not want you to do. Adversarial interop was the engine of technology dynamism for decades. Think of web browsers. Web browsers are open platforms, which means that you can modify them without having to circumvent anything. That is, without incurring a legal risk for changing how they work. And that's how it came to pass that 51% of web users installed an ad blocker that also protects their privacy. Doc Searles calls this the largest consumer boycott in human history. Now, imagine that we were all having a product planning meeting here today. And the team lead said, all right, folks, I've been doing some back-of-the-envelope math, and I figured it out. If we make the ads 20% more invasive and more obnoxious, we will get a 2% increase in our top-line ad revenue, and we all get a tidy bonus. At that point, someone sitting around the table, someone who does not give a damn about user well-being or product quality, might well put their hand up and say, Elon, I love how you think. But has it occurred to you that if we make these ads 20% more obnoxious and invasive, 40% of our users might go to the search engine and type, how do I block these goddamn ads? And the revenue from those users falls to zero forever, because no user ever goes back to the search engine and types, how do I start seeing ads again? So the fact that a web is an open platform means that you can do adversarial interop to it. And that means that web publishers have to tread lightly and consider what we might do in response to their own enshittifying impulses. But then there's apps. 51% of all web users have installed an ad blocker, and 0% of app users have installed an ad blocker, because there is a digital lock around every app, and circumventing that digital lock is a felony. So even though blocking ads is legal, figuring out how to block ads in an app is not legal. Which means that as that product meeting moves on to its next agenda item, and the team lead says now, on to our apps, I also figure 20% more obnoxious and invasive ads gets a 2% advertising top-line revenue lift, everyone turns to look at the person who spoke before, and they say, why are you thinking so small? Why stop at 20%? Why not make it 100% more invasive and obnoxious and see if we can get a 10% increase in our top line ad revenue? After all, we don't care if a user goes to the search engine and types, "How do I stop seeing ads in my apps?" Because the answer is, you cannot stop seeing ads in your apps. This is why every company is so horny to get you to use their apps instead of their web pages. An app is just a web page skinned in the IP that makes it a crime to defend your interests while you use it. So as IP metastasized, the discipline that interoperability imposed on tech companies withered away. All they had to do was add a digital lock, and they could criminalize any disenshittificatory gambit you cared to assay. So we got tractors, cars, ventilators, and iPhones that use digital locks to stop us from independently repairing them. We got ebooks that the manufacturer could delete later if they changed their minds about selling them to you. And we got the abomination that is the modern inkjet printer, which uses digital locks to stop you from using generic ink cartridges or refilling the manufacturer's own original cartridges. Today, printer ink is the most expensive fluid a civilian can purchase without a government permit. It runs more than $10,000 a gallon. It would be cheaper to print your grocery lists with the semen of a Kentucky Derby winning stallion than original HP ink. Why not? I mean, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to jailbreak your printer and risk a 5-year prison sentence for violating Section 1201 of the DMCA? It used to be that when a tech boss had a bad idea, they had to worry about competition, about regulation, about interoperability. But when these things were destroyed, enshittification followed. But tech bosses were not totally free to enshittify, because there was one more force that acted as a check on the enshittificatory impulses of the Zucker-Muskian mediocrities of the tech industry. And that force was tech workers. Tech workers are a very strange historical labor force, because until very recently, they were very powerful, commanding very high salaries and great deference from their bosses, and yet they were not unionized. Where did tech worker power come from, if not from solidarity? Well, it came from scarcity, which meant that tech bosses couldn't afford to treat tech workers like they treated the rest of their workforce, like Amazon warehouse workers who are injured at 3 times the rate of other warehouse workers in America and who have to piss in bottles because they lose their jobs if they stop to go to the toilet. Or there's Apple, who had to install suicide nets around iPhone City because people would rather die than face another day on the line. Meanwhile, at the tech shops that these bosses run, you have coders who get to come to work every day with facial piercings, pink mohawks, and black t-shirts that say things their boss doesn't understand. They get whimsical campuses with gourmet cafeterias, free kombucha and massages, gyms, daycares, and dry cleaning. And every week, tech bosses like Mark Zuckerberg and Sergey Brin host company-wide town meetings where the engineering staff gets to pelt them with impertinent questions and bad-tempered complaints about corporate strategy. And tech workers, they really cared about their users. They were Tron-pilled. They fought for the user. Tech bosses knew this was good for them. They cultivated this sense of mission. They told coders that their company's purpose was to organize all the world's information and make it useful, or to make the world more open and connected. So these powerful workers were induced to work late nights, early mornings, and weekends, to sleep under their desks, to be, as Elon Musk calls it, extremely hardcore. The problem for tech bosses is that if you motivate your workers by instilling and appealing to a sense of mission, your workers will feel a sense of mission. And when you order them to enshittify the product that they missed their mother's funeral to ship on time, they will experience a profound sense of moral injury that they will not be shy about sharing with you. And they will refuse, and if you push them, they will walk across the street and have another job by dinner time. And you won't be able to hire their replacement. But as tech monopolies grew, as the pool of trained engineers caught up with demand, the scarcity-based power of tech workers also slipped away. So in 2019, Google hit a wall. Search engine growth had stalled. So Google had this series of panicked meetings. The company had a 90% search market share. It could not find new users to search, so it decided it would have to squeeze new revenue out of existing search activity. Now, the person who was in charge of Google's search revenue at that time was an ex-McKinsey guy named Prabhakar Raghavan. And thanks to the Google antitrust trial, which published all the memos about the fight that ensued, we know what his solution was. Raghavan proposed increasing search revenue by making search worse. Because if Google search got worse, you would have to search more than once to get the answers you were seeking, and every time you searched, they got to show you another batch of ads. Now, Raghavan's idea did not go unopposed. In the emails published by the DOJ, we see his nemesis, a longtime Googler named Ben Gomes. Gomes was an OG Googler who had built up their server infrastructure from a few computers under a desk at Stanford to the global network of data centers. And by this point, he was in charge of search. And in the emails, Gomes is palpably appalled by the idea of making search worse to increase search volume. But he lost the argument because the engineers had been sidelined at Google. And Google search, it got enshittified. In 2023, Google fired 12,000 technical employees, including many of its most senior and therefore mouthiest engineers. In 2024, just a few months later, Google did a $70 billion stock buyback that would have paid their wages for the next 27 years. And in 2025, Google co-founder Sergey Brin announced that he would no longer be attending those town hall meetings every week with the technical workforce. And also in 2025, Mark Zuckerberg said he would stop showing up at the all-hands technical meetings every week, calling it not a good use of my time. Tech bosses do not care about their workers. And the fact that tech workers didn't unionize when they had power means that they are really screwed now. At tech companies, tech workers got massages and free egg freezing so they could work through their fertile years, while non-tech workers have had to contend with piss bottles, suicide nets, and on-the-job maiming. This is not because tech bosses are sentimental about engineers. They do not think of coders as peers, as temporarily embarrassed founders, as entrepreneurs in waiting. They see tech workers as a problem to solve, and they are solving it with mass layoffs and endless hype about how AI will replace programmers, a not so subtle way of telling tech workers to stop being so goddamn mouthy. And the US has had 500,000 tech layoffs in the last 3 years, and Google, they lost the antitrust case. They were convicted of creating and maintaining an illegal monopoly and lowering quality through it. And in September, Judge Amit Mehta, the judge who had found them guilty, sentenced them to no punishment at all. Google will not have to spin off Chrome or Android. It won't have to destroy its surveillance data or let new Android users choose a browser when they set up their phone. It won't have to stop spending $20 billion a year bribing Apple not to make a competing search engine. All Google is going to have to do, and I'm not making this up, all Google is going to have to do is share our private data with other search engines. That's it. Google became too big to fail. It became too big to jail. And as Ben Gomes found out, Google is too big to care. That is where enshittification came from. It's not that people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Sergey Brin, Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella, and the rest weren't in tech's halls of power all this time. They would have enshittified from day one if they could have, but they could not. They were stopped by competition, regulation, interoperability, and the power of the tech workforce. And it wasn't tech bosses who created the conditions that led to the destruction of competition, regulation, interoperability, and tech worker power. It was policymakers. Antitrust, killed by the Chicago School of Economists, led by the racist criminal Robert Bork. Anti-circumvention, created by Bill Clinton's IP czar, a guy called Bruce Lehman, who, and then the US trade representative arm-twisted every one of America's trading partners into adopting a law just like the American DMCA. In Canada, where I'm from, like all the best Americans, I'm Canadian. In Canada, the disgraced sex pest Tony Clement and his pal James Moore, when they were ministers for Prime Minister Stephen Harper, rammed through anti-circumvention in the teeth of a nationwide opposition. They consulted on the matter. 6,100 and some Canadians said it was a terrible idea. 53 said they liked the sound of it. James Moore gave a speech where he said his opponents were, quote, babyish radical extremists. They whipped the vote and got the law. And George W. Bush killed the antitrust enforcement against Microsoft, while Obama's FTC let Facebook buy Instagram. Judge Amit Mehta did not publish Google when he had the chance. These are the people who created the Enshittification. Zuck and Musk and all those other tech bosses on Trump's inaugural dais, they are monsters every one, but without power and wealth that they acquired thanks to these policy catastrophes, they'd just be a bunch of assholes with bad ideas. Not the people redesigning the world's digital infrastructure as a system for delivering mass surveillance, mass censorship, control, and conquest. So what do we do about this? Well, in the book that I've got coming out, there's early copies now, it comes out next month. In the book that I've got coming out, Enshittification, I have several chapters about how we can address these problems. And a lot of the early reviews have a common complaint that these solution chapters don't have much that we can do as individuals about enshittification. And they're entirely correct. I mean, hell yeah. We are not going to fix enshittification by making good personal choices. You cannot vote with your wallet. A vote with your wallet is always won by the people who have the fattest wallets. You cannot fix end-stage capitalism by making thoughtful consumption choices any more than you can avert the climate emergency by recycling carefully. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an answer. There is a hell of a lot that we can do to end the Enshitticene and build a new good internet, one with all the technological self-determination of the old good internet, but all that greased slide ease of use that Web 2.0 brought in, so that our normie friends can join us there. But it's all stuff that we need to do as a group, as a citizenry, as a polity, as a movement. Not we as a collection of atomized individuals agonizing over whether we should be on Blue Sky or Mastodon. I mean, sure, by all means, get off Twitter. It's good for your mental health, but don't kid yourself that you're going to fix anything by doing that. To fix things, we need to unwind 40 years worth of policy disasters to create the inhospitable environment for the enshittifiers among us. And here is some good news. This is actually happening. All this decade, we have seen a massive resurgence in antitrust enforcement all around the world. In the US, under Trump 1, under Biden, in a way not seen for generations, but also in the UK, under a succession of increasingly dysfunctional Tory governments, most of which lasted for weeks. The Competition and Markets Authority was a rare and consistent beacon of brilliance in effective regulation. In the European Union in 2024, we got the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, a suite of far-reaching muscular limits on tech power. And in Canada, where I'm from, our Competition Bureau is so ineffectual that it has only challenged 3 mergers in its entire history. But that's okay because it's only successfully challenged 0 mergers in its entire history. And last year, Parliament gave them the most sweeping powers, I think, of any competition regulator in the world. We have seen antitrust awakenings in France, in Spain, in Australia, in South Korea, in Japan, and in China. And I just want to stop for a second here and note what a goddamn miracle this is. Because it is a bedrock of political science orthodoxy that when a billionaire objects to a policy, that policy will not come to pass. And yet, in these countries, all over the world, they are enforcing antitrust laws, passing new antitrust laws, doing this stuff that strikes at the root of oligarch wealth and power. It's like they have repealed political science's law of gravity, and most of us haven't even noticed. It's a miracle. And I think I know why it's happening. I think it's happening because of you. Because although you may know it, you are part of a movement of people who are so done with oligarchy. Let me explain here. So my pal James Boyle teaches at Duke Law School. He has this little parable about what happened when the word ecology entered our lexicon. Because before that word came along, people didn't know they were on the same side. You care about owls, I care about the ozone layer. What do your charismatic nocturnal avians have to do with my concerns about the gaseous composition of the upper atmosphere, right? It's only when we have the word ecology that we recognize that these 1,000 issues are a movement and we start getting stuff done. And today, a new movement is a-borning, a movement of people who are coming to understand that fascism, genocide, the climate emergency, inequality, xenophobia, and mass immiseration are all downstream of the power of concentrated wealth. Thank you. I'll take a sip of water while you do that. And the first stirrings of that movement are creating a bow wave that is propelling the global antitrust revolution. We should be grateful, of course, to brilliant enforcers like Biden's FTC chair, Lena Khan, and his CFPB chair, Rohit Chopra, and his DOJ antitrust boss, Jonathan Cantor. But the reason those brilliant people got to do their brilliant jobs is us, our fury, inchoate, swirling, massing. You can't fix enshittification, but we can. Now, for 23 years, I've been an activist with a digital rights group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We work to protect rights online and then, these days, to stop rights offline from being destroyed by what's going on online. And Electronic Frontier Foundation organizes a national network of community-based independent activist groups that work on these issues at their local and state level. That network is called the Electronic Frontier Alliance, and if you go to efa.eff.org, you can find groups all over the country that are working on these issues and sharing information and tactics and solidarity with one another. You don't have to fight enshittification alone. You can fight it together. And you know what? This is our moment. You may not realize this, but one of the biggest impediments to fighting big tech all over the world has been the US trade representative. It was the US trade rep who bullied Canada, Europe, Mexico, and every other US trading partner into passing anti-circumvention laws. Laws that make it illegal for technologists in those countries to build and sell the 11-foot ladders that we can use to get over big tech's 10-foot piles of shit. The US trade rep told America's trading partners that if they didn't let big tech rip off the people in their country, America would impose tariffs on them. Well, happy Liberation Day, everyone. As Trump hits the world with his tariffs, the best response is not retaliatory tariffs. That just makes the things you import from America more expensive. In Canada, they think they're going to fight American tariffs by banning bourbon and drinking shitty Canadian rye. I have a better way. Far better to change your laws to unleash your technologists and let them disenshittify big tech. If you really want to hurt Elon Musk, don't kvetch about his Nazi salute. Make it legal for every mechanic in the world to jailbreak every Tesla in the world so that all the subscription features come for one price and Elon doesn't get a nickel. Kick that guy square in the dongle. The country that does this gets to have the relationship to disenshittifying products, cars and tractor diagnostics, independent app stores, generic ink, that Finland had to mobile phones during the Nokia decade. There's nothing wrong with moving fast and breaking things so long as those things belong to tech billionaires. The Enshitternet is not the result of the great forces of history or the iron laws of economics. It is the foreseeable outcome of policy decisions made in living memory. We do not have to remain prisoners of those policy decisions. We can build a new good internet and install countermeasures that ensure that would-be oligarchs never gain the power that they need to be more than boring assholes. We can restore competition law. We can effectively regulate. We can bring privacy into the 21st century. We can get rid of the farcical notion that gig workers are not employees. We can abolish the IP laws that make it a crime to arrange your affairs to your own benefit rather than those of the shareholders of the company that made your gadget. We can unionize tech workers. We can unionize all workers. Now, Trump illegally tore up 1 million federal workers' contracts, and he gutted the NLRB, also illegally. But Trump has got a surprise coming, because he thinks the reason we have unions is because we have labor law. He's got it backwards. We got labor laws because working people had illegal unions that made it impossible not to have labor laws. They risked arrests, they risked beatings, they risked assassinations, and they won. And then we formalized that victory with labor law. Trump thinks that because he fired the ref, it means the game is over. What he doesn't understand is that all that means is that there are no more rules. Because labor law was always as much about what workers couldn't do to their bosses as it was about what bosses couldn't do to their workers, and now all bets are off. There is a reason fascists always start by attacking organized labor, because solidarity is the opposite of fascism. So that's what I'm going to leave you with at the end of this talk. Solidarity, the new ecology. That's the team we're on. That is the antidote to enshittification. There are two kinds of people in this world. People who see others as a means to an end, and people who see others as ends in their own right. In their secret heart, tech bosses don't think we're real. That's why Elon Musk calls the people who disagree with him non-player characters. To them, we are a resource to exploit. If you believe we're more than that, if you believe every person is worthy of moral consideration because they are a person, then you're on Team Solidarity. The Solidarinet is the opposite of the Enshitternet, and we can build it. The new good internet that we will need to organize, to survive and overcome the climate emergency, fascism and genocide, racism, xenophobia, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia, to build the 21st century's central nervous system and wire us together for a future without fear. Thank you. Very kind of you, thank you. Whew. Okay, I think we're doing questions now, is that right? And so, good question is one part, not two. It's never more of a comment than a question. I don't know if we have mics or if I'm just going to repeat the questions. Are you going to rove with a mic?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, I'll call on people. You can hand out the mic. If you've got a question, stick your hand up. I mean, I know that was all pretty non-controversial. And self-explanatory. There's a gent there with a white shirt on the aisle, it looks like. So no, not on an aisle, just right in the middle. There we go.
So I forget the term you were using, but you were talking about how it's illegal to sort of like see inside the box.
Anti-circumvention, yeah.
Anti-circumvention. If you were to make that legal, I mean, wouldn't you run into a problem of like people being able to hack things?
Yeah, so the question is like, if we say people are allowed to unilaterally modify how products work, might they use that power to harm us?
Yeah.
And it is true that tech companies sometimes use that power to protect us, right? The fact that the App Store blocks malicious apps is, it's incontrovertible. And while it's fine, I think, for people to say, I want Tim Cook and his bureaucrats to decide which apps I can use, I think that if they don't like the decisions Apple makes, they should be allowed to choose someone else, not least because Tim Cook understands that if you can't go elsewhere, he will sometimes make decisions that are bad for you, because while his engineers will protect you from external threats, they won't protect you from him. So in China, they removed all the working privacy tools from the App Store, and then when AirDrop was being used to circulate information that was hostile to Xi Jinping, they changed AirDrop for every user in the world so that it couldn't be used anonymously in the way that it was being used in China. They are really good at protecting you from external threats, but not from themselves. And if you want them to curb their own behavior, we need to have the choice to go somewhere else. Now, that doesn't mean that anyone should be able to do anything to you with an app. The right way to make sure that you have privacy in an app is to start with a thing that says you have privacy under law, not that you have privacy because a tech boss decided this app got to invade your privacy. So back to Apple. You've probably seen their billboards all over the world that say Apple protects your privacy, we respect your privacy. And if you're an iOS user, you might have seen that your iPhone a few years ago got a little tick box. And if you ticked it, it stopped apps from spying on you. And it blocked third-party app tracking. 96% of iOS users ticked that box. I assume the other 4% were drunk or Facebook employees or drunk Facebook employees, which makes sense, because if I worked at Facebook, I'd be drunk all the time. But what Apple did as they rolled this tick box out, which cost Facebook $10 billion in the first year, according to Mark Zuckerberg's shareholder disclosures, is they started spying on users in exactly the same way to power a rival ad targeting network that they operate. So again, they'll defend you against external threats, but not against themselves. And so let the arbiter of what apps can and can't do be democratically accountable lawmakers, and let the extent to which we submit ourselves to the authority of private powers be determined by a voluntary choice, and not by someone in this perverse way wielding the power of the state, not to have democratic accountability, but to take it away and make us subjects of the unilateral authority of firms.
Thanks.
Thanks. There's a woman just behind you? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you for a talk that gave me a funny foreign feeling I haven't felt in a long time.
Oh.
I think it was hope and power. Ooh. Amazing. But my question is not an ideas one. Can you tell us about all of this art? I didn't catch that.
I make these weird collages. I have a blog. I've been a blogger for 25 years. I have a blog called pluralistic.net. And I write about 5 to 6 essays a week on it. And I needed illustrations. And it's open access. It's like gold open access, CC BY. So you can take it, you can sell it, you can give it away. And it's very hard to find art to accompany articles that is licensable under those terms. So I started scouring the Library of Congress, public domain sources, the Met's archive, the Wellcome Trust, and then various archives of Creative Commons licensed materials for things that were freely reusable, and making weird collages. And it became this incredibly fun artistic expression I never thought I would enjoy. I actually just Vanity published a little book of these called Canny Valley, and Bruce Sterling was good enough to write a great introduction for me. It's going to be available as a fundraiser premium for Creative Commons. It's their 25th anniversary this year. There were 500 copies printed, 100 went through my Kickstarter. I kept 25 for gifts, and there's 375 in the Creative Commons fundraiser this fall. So keep your eye open for that if you want a copy of the book. Yeah. Gentleman in the back there, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for the outlook, perhaps through history of how this was built. I know you have a talk also on AI, but I would like you to perhaps make a small trailer of that and connect this process of the bringing of AI to daily users and this forced move of having most services offering but even making very hard to disable AI in the whole situation, and how it fits into this enshittification process and model, because that seems what's actually happening.
Well, they have literally swapped the buttons you push most often with buttons that summon an AI. I mean, it is really just like someone's KPI, like someone's bonus depends on getting you to use AI a certain number of times, and they figured out that if they just make you fat finger the AI enough times, they will get a ski holiday this Christmas. It's crazy. I'm going to be giving a talk on Thursday about AI. I wrote a book about it over the summer called the title's probably going to change, but it's called The Reverse Centaur's Guide to AI. And in automation theory, a centaur is someone who's assisted by a machine, and a reverse centaur is someone who's been conscripted to assist a machine. If you've ever seen the I Love Lucy, where Lucy and Ethel are working on the chocolate conveyor belt, and their job is to put the chocolates in the box, because the conveyor belt can move the chocolates around, but it can't put the chocolates in the box. They are the hands of the machine, and the machine goes faster and faster until they can't possibly keep up. That's a reverse centaur. And I think that there are lots of ways that AI, which is a kind of incoherent grab bag of technologies, but some of the things that we talk about when we talk about AI could allow people to be centaurs. And I do think that when you hear people talk about AI and say, I love it and I use it in a way that makes my work and my life better, and you interrogate it, it always turns out that they're a centaur, right? Like, no one's telling them they have to use it. No one fired 3/4 of their department and said, now you pick up the work with the AI. You're the human in the loop, which means that you're here to take the blame when the errors that are going past too fast for you to notice them manifest, and the radiology bot misses a solid mass tumor, or the child protection services bot takes away someone's kids, or the robotaxi bot, hits a pedestrian and drags them 20 yards, right? It's you're the accountability sink. And I'm a science fiction writer, and the job of science fiction writers is not to predict the future. It's not to be prophets. It's not even to describe what gadgets do. It's to imagine different ways that gadgets could do things for and to people, different social arrangements. And I think that if you want to connect this to enshittification, that tech bosses practice a kind of vulgar Thatcherism. Margaret Thatcher, she said, there is no alternative, which is this like thought-ending aphorism that's supposed to stop you trying to imagine an alternative. And tech bosses want you to think that there is no alternative, right? That like the way that the technology is constituted and used today, it is inconceivable for it to be constituted and used in some other way, right? Like having a friend without Mark Zuckerberg being in the room is like having water that's not wet, right? It's just impossible. I don't even know why you're asking for it, right? Having a phone that works without Tim Cook getting 30 cents from everyone who sells you an app is impossible. Not a policy choice, but an impossibility. And AI is like this. They want you to think that all the arrangements of AI are inevitable and not that they are socially contingent. The AI bubble exists solely because investors want to make a bet on displacing wages. It's not on increasing productivity in the sense of letting one person do more. It's productivity in the sense of letting fewer people do the same amount and having the surplus generated by zeroing out that wage bill split among customers for AI and AI companies. What's the last thing I'll say about this before moving on? Because I have a whole talk about it, obviously, on Thursday. I think it's important that if we're going to lay siege to the AI bubble, which I think we should do, that we concentrate our fire on the foundations of AI, the expected return on investment that is driving the investment mania. And so while there are many AI applications that are terrible, a lot of them are not a source of expected income for AI. Right? And while it would be good to ban election disinformation and good to ban deepfake non-consensual pornography and good to ban, what's another terrible application? Well, those two, say. It would be great if we could get rid of them. Even if we did, it wouldn't make a dent in the expected revenue of AI companies. The total wage bill, even illustrators, right? The total wage bill of all the illustrators in America doesn't pay for the massage therapists who come in once a week at OpenAI, right? Like it's gross that they're trying to destroy the livelihoods of illustrators, and the CTO of OpenAI is saying some creative jobs just should never have existed. But even if you made her stop, and even if they stopped having these AI illustrator bots that are intended to bankrupt illustrators, not to let you play around, but to bankrupt illustrators, it wouldn't change the expected income of AI companies enough to make any kind of dent in the revenues. So you have to be a materialist about it, you have to be tactical, and you have to aim at the material root of the investment bubble if you want to end the bubble. So the person there in a black t-shirt with, yeah, there you go.
Say one has solidarity. Like college and more broadly Ithaca, New York is probably one of the easiest places in the world to get solidarity. I don't know if you saw our encampment. I don't know if, I've been part of communities in undergrad where people give each other food and do mutual aid on the small scale.
Right.
Where college students fail, at least in my experience, is getting from the solidarity to the action. So I don't know if this is too much to ask an author, infringing on your IP or whatnot, but I was going to ask for some spoilers, perhaps what to do once you have solidarity, because there are different ways of organizing.
Right.
So just some guidance there, because we have a room of people who want to do the next step.
Well, so like I say, the Electronic Frontier Alliance has been really successful in promulgating ordinances like the Stop Flock ordinances that are being proposed here, limiting things like facial recognition, putting procurement rules in state and local governments, requiring them to have transparency in the tools that they have. And I'm now organizing a campaign because the USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, has a mandatory review at the 5-year period, and I'm organizing a campaign in Mexico, Canada, and the US to get activists to convince their trade reps, probably not here, but in those 2 other countries, to demand that the IP chapter have the ban on auditing source code and AI taken out, and also the anti-circumvention stuff taken out. It sounds like proceduralism, but it opens up a lot of possibilities, probably not here, but there. I think that there's a lot of even American investors and American technologists who would happily move to another country if they could work on this stuff. Not to mention that there's plenty of people in those countries who could do that work themselves. So that's a historically contingent campaign that is relevant to this moment that I think we have an opportunity for. In America, obviously the rule of law is at a low ebb. And there's limits to what I can say about electoral politics because I'm at least partly here in my capacity as an employee at a 501c3, but electoral politics are changing. And there are opportunities, not solely in one party or the other others, that are changing the nature of the leadership and the policies that they're pursuing. And that is a major opportunity on the electoral side. I, to be honest, have a lot more hope internationally. I think there are places with a much stronger rule of law than America. I think most places right now have a stronger rule of law than America, and that those places are extremely well situated to reconsider their tech policies because they've organized their tech policies around preserving the advantages of American tech firms at their own expense. And really that story has collapsed, I think, that the benefits of free trade outweigh the costs because they're not getting the benefits of free trade anymore. And I think that, if you're going to work on enshittification here, it has to be through things that are part of a larger movement. It's going to be through things like labor organizing and anti-genocide organizing and so on, things that are oriented around smashing the power of concentrated wealth, because enshittification is downstream of that. If I could wave a wand, I've got a half dozen policies America could implement. We could just update our privacy laws. And I think there's actually probably some scope for updating our privacy laws, if only because there's a lot of people on different sides of the aisle and from different walks of life who don't know it, but they all are angry about privacy. They think they're angry because Grampy is a QAnon, or because they saw a millennial quoting Osama bin Laden on TikTok, or because they think Instagram made their kid anorexic, or because there's deepfake porn of them, or because, the January 6 rioters were rounded up with reverse warrants, or because Black Lives Matter demonstrators or anti-ICE demonstrators are being rounded up with reverse warrants. What they don't know is that they're all angry about the vacuum of privacy in America, and they're all being victimized by it. In the last days of the Biden administration, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau actually promulgated a rule that would have killed the data brokerage industry, which was immediately killed by the Trump administration. But I testified at the hearing about that rule, and the speaker before me was someone from the American Association of Retired People who discussed the fact that data brokers will let you target ads to seniors with dementia. And the speaker after me was from the DOD, who said that you can target gambling ads to people with gambling problems on military bases. So, there's a lot of people who are really feeling the bite of this, and I think the coalition for it could be quite large. When you look at the passage of state-level successful privacy laws, like in Illinois, the biometric privacy law, it was a very purple law passed in a very purple legislature with very purple support. And it wasn't about oligarch power, right? It was about these bread and butter issues about people getting ripped off. Those nurses would not have their wages docked for having credit card debt if you couldn't buy their credit history on the open market. So there's so much potential around these individual issues that are not necessarily politicized in these wider struggles. But I think that the more progress we make on these issues, the more space we have to pursue the more foundational struggle, right? Your comrades who are can't make rent are going to be too busy hustling Uber to come to the demonstration. And so if we can figure some of this stuff out, we can open up the space for more other stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks. There's a woman just 2 seats over. There you go.
Thank you for this talk. I'm a librarian here at Cornell, and one thing librarians have seen over the past few years, or decade really, is the rise of academic publishing database monopolies that are also doubling as data brokers. These companies control access to academic information despite the labor coming from academic researchers and scholars. So my question is, what can scholars, researchers, and librarians do to push back against the enshittification of information access?
It's a great question, and also thank you for your service as a recovering library worker. If you want to see a collective action problem in the wild, right, look at academic publishing. No one likes the journals, but they all need the impact factor, and so they submit to them, and then the institution has to buy them because that's the impact journal. It's crazy, and when you look at how they got the power that they have, it wasn't by publishing the best journals, it was by buying all the companies that published all the best journals, right? So again, this is a problem that is downstream of a lack of merger scrutiny. And in Nova Scotia, they have this, or Newfoundland rather, they have this saying, if you wanted to get there, I wouldn't start from here. We are already in a situation where it's very hard to fight back because they have so much power. And this is why the original antitrust laws were organized around preventing the accumulation of power rather than punishing the misuse of power, because there's this understanding that by the time John D. Rockefeller is, running your country, it's hard to bring him to heel. And it would be much better to stop him from getting too big for his britches, even if that means that maybe you get one fewer pipeline out of him. In terms of how academics have to organize around this, I think that this needs to be understood as a solidarity issue among students and academics, right? I think that professionally academics need to be censoring their peers who participate in the WEEs where they get an e-textbook that is new every year and they get a kind of kickback because they get to write an introduction for it or what have you, and you cut the legs out from under the used market. I think academic librarians have done good work on this, but there's more to do. So my old intern is a guy called Bobby Glushko, who when he was the librarian at UMass Amherst, won a lawsuit called Hathi Trust that established that libraries get to scan their collections and circulate them, and that is one way around the gouging of ebooks, right? One of the reasons they gouge you on electronic materials is because there's no other way to procure those materials except from them, but you can scan those materials. Figuring out how to get the faculty to stick with open access, and specifically the kind of open access that doesn't come with usurious fees, is a hard problem, but there has been progress, right? Like MIT walked away from, I want to say Elsevier, right? And has saved a gigantic amount of money, and so has the UC system. And so there is some scope for librarians pushing back in unison. And I think when you combine the fact that you have access to these self-help measures where you can scan and circulate your collections, including as interlibrary loans, and that you can organize boycotts of unfair publishers, that you can in fact make a difference. You have a big collective action problem, right? You have to get every faculty every staff in the faculty and every university to agree to this, or enough of them to agree to this that you can make a dent in it. But students suffer as a result of it, and I don't think students understand it. And so getting students to understand that the reason their textbooks cost as much as they do, and the reason that materials are so expensive, and the share of their tuition that's going to acquiring these materials from these monopolists, I think would make a difference, because right now those costs are all hidden. So I don't know, it'd be this is just me spitballing, but what if your tuition bill came with a line item for Elsevier? Speaking as someone who just paid his first tuition bill, my daughter is going to UCSC in 2 weeks. She's going to be a banana slug. I have to say, I would have stopped and thought if there had been an Elsevier line on that bill. Thanks. I don't know how much time we have, Ray.
Yeah, so we have about, you take a couple more questions.
Couple more. How many questions are lurking out there in Potentia? Maybe we can do a speed round. Just two. Okay, why don't I take both of your questions, and then I brought this along. It's a thing I found on the internet that lets me make books non-returnable, and I'll show you how it works.
Yeah, so I'm interested, I think you sort of alluded to it before, but in a bit of a comparative analysis, if you will. It seems like enshittification is worse here than in many other countries, or can you say that? Are there sort of elements of regulatory structure that could be linked to something that you might want to mention here?
So, I mean, the enshittification takes on national characteristics that are contingent based on the local political climate, right? So in Europe, for example, they have a really good privacy law. The General Data Privacy Regulations passed 9 years ago, but it has been an enforcement catastrophe. And the reason for that is the structure of European federalism. So every American tech company pretends it's Irish, so that they can pretend that their money is floating in a state of untaxable grace over the Irish Sea. But if you are, like by definition, if you have the nous to pretend to be Irish this week, you could pretend you are Luxembourgeois next week. And so if Ireland enforces any laws that these companies don't like, they'll be in Cyprus, Malta, the Netherlands, Luxembourg next week. And so the Irish Data Commissioner doesn't enforce the GDPR. And all the enforcement cases start in the Irish regulatory apparatus, and they take a decade, so they're just starting to reach the federal courts now. You know, most days, that regulator is like not getting out of bed, and when they do, they sit around in their underwear eating breakfast cereal and watching cartoons, right? Like, it's just the place where all of this enforcement goes to die. So they were able to pass the law, but they couldn't enforce it. Now, interestingly, in 2024, we got the Digital Markets Act. And the Digital Markets Act makes the first port of call for all privacy-related questions the federal court. So they're just moving it out of Ireland, right? Like, if you guys can't cooperate, none of you gets the Xbox controller. We're keeping it up here now. So that's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, especially in light of the move towards what they're calling a Euro stack, which is a stack of technology that is independent of American tech firms. And it remains to be seen what they manage of it, but the fact that there is this move means that it's something that activists who care about it should be capitalizing on. I'm perfectly willing to stipulate that they could make it very bad, but I think we should be trying to prevent that because this is a move that we haven't seen in a long time. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. It is different from how it is here. One big difference between America and everywhere else is if you're, say, Canada, you get all the consumer surplus that's been drained away through these monopolistic rent extracting tactics, right? So everyone is paying more as a result of this stuff. But what you are not getting is your stock market being buoyed up by the firms that are extracting these rents. So it's all downside, no upside. And if you wanted to, understand, I think, how, for example, Europe passed the GDPR and then the Digital Markets Act, it's that. Right? If the European stock market was dominated by Nokia, Deutsche Telekom, Olivetti, BT, and so on, and those were the big tech stocks, and Europe's ruling class had like 70% of their net worth tied up in them, we never would have gotten the GDPR. But you take the tech stocks out of the American stock market, and it's in the red. It's deeply, deeply in the red. And so this is one of the reasons it's very hard for the US to move on these, because anything you do to reduce those rents reduces that margin. Okay, so the last question was back there, yeah.
Are there any considerations we should keep in mind when trying to educate ourselves further on this topic, considering how many news and information sources are in bed or are reliant on these monopolies?
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, media does not like tech, obviously, for the most part, but they have this, they're entangled in them in this terrible way. In Canada, we got what they called a news bargaining code. You have to license the right as a tech platform to have links to the news and to discuss the news. And the thought was that this was a way to make the news pay back some of the money they take from the media outlets. I think it's a disaster. It makes the media outlets dependent on tech, right? If you were ever to successfully break big tech's power, you would lose the subsidy that keeps you afloat. I think it really badly misaligns it, especially when there's a lot of stuff that tech steals from the press, but links to the press are not a thing that they steal, right? It is not bad for the news to have people talking about the news and finding the news. News you're not allowed to find or talk about is a secret. So, if we really wanted to help the news in policy, we would do things like force structural separation of ad tech, where right now the ad tech market, and Google just lost another monopoly case about this, the ad tech market is structured so that the Google and Meta each own what's called a sell-side platform, which is where publishers go to list their inventory, a buy-side platform where advertisers go to try and buy ads, and then the marketplace in between. And then they use them, so they're also publishers and advertisers. So this is like if you went to court to get a divorce and you found out that you and your partner had the same lawyer, who then got up on the bench and was the judge, and you looked over their shoulder and they were trying to match with both of you on Tinder. And here's the thing, tech takes 51% out of the ad market. So the historic share that intermediaries took out of the ad market was 15%. So they've more than tripled it. So it's like when the gavel comes down and you're like, well, who gets the house? It turns out it's the lawyer, right? So I think that media has really badly misconstrued what they need to do. I think breaking up the ad tech stacks, breaking up the payments processing system. You know, if you're the Toronto Star or the New York Times and you're getting advertising subscribers through an app, 30 cents out of every dollar is going to Apple or Google. If you just move that to a regular payment processor, which has a 1 to 3% margin, it would be like you added 25% to your subscriber base overnight. Right? And so there are all these like things that if we let go of this, like someone talked about the news the wrong way and start going like someone took my money and thought about where your money went instead of being irate about there being links to your website that you didn't authorize, then these publishers would be doing much better. In terms of publishers who do a good job reporting on this, I mean, there are writers at all the major outlets who are very good. Even the outlets that are themselves not great. So the Wall Street Journal has done amazing tech reporting. So has the Washington Post. They have a great stringer in Silicon Valley. The New York Times has done incredible frontline reporting. Just don't read Casey Newton, right? Like don't read Kevin Roos. Don't read the editorialists who are just like, I used AI and it changed my life and I have had to go to the emergency room for my priapism, right? Like read people who are critical and thoughtful in those papers, but then read the outlets that are really good. So there's 404 Media, spectacular. Two Condé Nast properties have been doing wonderful work in this, specifically in this era. Ars Technica and Wired News have both really been leaders. And ours has always been good. Wired has been erratic. I speak as someone who's written for Wired since the early 90s. There have been good times and bad times with Wired, but Wired is really crushing it right now. And there's a bunch of newsletter writers who are great. Brian Merchant is amazing. Molly White is amazing. And I should finish with this because it's a good one. So I had lunch with Molly. And she said, I'm a little conflicted because I'm about to become the executor of my great-grandfather's literary estate. And I'm a Wikipedian, I'm a free software author, a little skeptical about copyright. I'm like, oh, your great-grandfather, that's adorable. Did he write a memoir? She said, no, I'm Molly White. He's E.B. White. So every time you assign the elements of style, Molly gets to write more shit about Web3. It's great. All right, well, thank you all very much.